This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
When Tim Mahoney, the writer and director of the Patterns of Evidence documentary, was gathering information for his next documentary, he ran into a snag. All of the so-called experts he spoke with told him that Moses did not write the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. In a nutshell, that meant that everything in the Bible afterwards could be called a fairy tale. And the Messiah, who said that Moses wrote about him, could be called a liar. Tonight, we begin to clear the air as Michael Rood welcomes Tim Mahoney for the Moses controversy. Because it's the end of the 6th day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live.
As they take this message out into the world.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Hey, Passover is next week, and we want you to experience it. All you have to do is follow the information there on the bottom of your screen. We have amazing information from Nehemiah Gordon about the connection between the split rock at Rephidim, the rock that Moses struck and water gushed out, and the pool of Siloam in Jerusalem. More about that in just a minute with my special co-host. But first, have you seen it yet? Last night was the first showing across America of Tim Mahoney's new documentary, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy. It's also playing tomorrow night and also next Tuesday. So that's March 16 and 19, if you're keeping track. And also next week, we're having a private showing of the documentary at Passover 2019 here in Charlotte. So what's the controversy in the Moses controversy? Well, there's a commonly held theory in theological cemeteries, as Michael Rood would call them, that Moses never really wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. Well, who cares? Well, you should, because if Moses did not write the Torah, then Jesus, Yeshua, is a liar because he said that Moses wrote about him. Now, folks who come to our Passover event next week will find out all about that because we have been given a private screening of that new documentary at the event. Let's talk more about that and what Passover has to offer with my co-host. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Rood Awakening International, Ted Clayton.
Hi, Scott.
Welcome to Shabbat Night Live, Ted.
Thank you for having me up here today.
So, the Patterns of Evidence new documentary, that's only being shown in-house at the event.
Yes, and it's a tremendous thing. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen the Patterns of Evidence, the Moses controversy, you need to be at Passover this year. We're going to have an exclusive showing. It's going to be amazing. And this is just incredible to think that Moses couldn't have written the Torah. I mean, really?
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's just incredible. So I know that Tim Mahoney is going to disprove that and make sure that Moses, in fact, did write the Torah.
Right. You and I have been given a little behind-the-scenes look at this thing before it was actually put to film.
Yes.
And I noticed, Ted, that one thing you said that was some documentaries, you watch and you kind of fall asleep and this is getting boring.
Through it, you're going, oh my gosh.
But this one held your attention.
Absolutely. It was fabulous. It was fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an event. So you definitely want to either go to the theater and watch it at the theater, or come to Passover 2019 and watch it with us at Passover.
Or do both.
Or do both. That's right,
exactly.
There's going to be so much stuff happening at Passover this year that it's just incredible. We've got David Robinson, who's going to be doing a conversation about Aviv Fellowships. We've got you, who's going to tell us about your lecture.
We're going to do something different. We're going to give you the basics of how to reverse, problems that are happening in your life because of diet and such. But then we're going to go out into the crowd and say, okay, what problem are you dealing with? And just basically challenge folks to prove that they can heal themselves. And that's going to be an exciting thing. We're going to get people to help mentor each other. It's going to be a great time, so make sure you come to that. That's early Saturday morning, but David's is early on Friday at 11 a.m. We're starting earlier than usual, so make sure you're there for David's talk, because if you've ever thought about having an Aviv fellowship, or you don't have a fellowship near you, he's going to show you how to start one.
Folks, we've got so much stuff going on. We've got the matzah mixer.
That's fun.
going to be happening. That's always fun when you're making the matzah and making and having a great social with your friends and so forth. There, Nehemiah is going to have a tremendous lecture, as Scott already talked about here just a little while ago, and it's just jam-packed. Michael's going to be doing the Seder. The Seder is always a great event. You don't want to miss it. Either watch online or get some tickets and come to Charlotte and be with us for Passover.
Now, we've actually got another guest coming. We won't mention him, but there's another guest coming with Nehemiah.
That's correct.
Who's going to just blow this whole thing open. So this is going to be an exciting time. We haven't mentioned the second guest up till now. It's kind of a surprise guest.
Right.
So if you haven't got your ticket, like Ted said, get in there, get watching it. Now, the only thing you don't see really, other than the matzah mixer and things you can't be there for, online is the documentary. So if you want to see the documentary, you should come and see it in person.
And of course, as always, we have Circle the Wagons with Michael, that intimate time with Michael Rood that you get to share your testimony, and Michael gets to sit back and listen to what you have to say.
That's right. Now, if you want to see what's the difference, well, if I go there, if I go online, what's the difference? Well, just go to PassoverCharlotte.com, and about halfway down the page, you'll see a comparison chart there. What you'll get if you come, what you get if you see it online.
Yes.
And then you're given an option there, which one you want to do, and you'll be taken to the right place, and you won't have to do any guesswork. So don't worry about that.
Just a tremendous time to be had by all. You don't want to miss it. Either watch online or get some tickets and be with us, especially if you're here in Charlotte and watching us on the local Charlotte television station. Please feel free to come by and be with us.
Now, real quick, we've just finished Nehemiah Gordon's series, speaking of Nehemiah, Jumping Through Flaming Hoops. That has just finished last week. Now you can get the DVD online at roodawakening.tv/store. And they were talking about everything from the Jerusalem Council to the scrolls of Auschwitz. It was great. And also, what's necessary for being a believer? What's not necessary? How has Jehovah guided us through the ages? This series took us through all of that.
Yes.
And it was just... They started with a script, what they were going to talk about, and it completely went sideways. So it's a great thing to watch because it's completely off the cuff with Michael and Nehemiah. Awesome to watch. Now, coming up, the first episode of Michael Rood and Tim Mahoney's new series, The Moses Controversy. And we have you to thank for it. We do absolutely everything we can to give you teachings every week, but we have no sponsors. There are no corporations or trust funds keeping this thing going. As long as we have support from our viewers, i.e. you, we keep this thing going. That's why it's so important to stand with us, stand with Michael Rood to keep this information going out across the world. Now, our love gift this month is one of the best ways to help us do that. Here's a little sneak peek right here. Here's how you can take part. Keep watching. In the midst of disagreements with other followers who just couldn't handle the task of preaching a message so radically different, Paul and Barnabas set off alone to Antioch. They've earned a following of their own by now, and they are greeted with excitement or derision wherever they go. At Antioch, they are asked to speak in the synagogue.
And after the reading of the Torah and the prophets, the leaders of the synagogue then said to them, "Men and brethren, if you have any word of exhortation for the people, say on."
This month, Michael Rood digs deep into what it means to give your life to Yeshua. In The Road to Antioch, you will see the beginnings of a great division that exists today and centers around this question: did Yeshua come to do away with the Torah or fulfill it?
Their burnt offerings or sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people.
The Road to Antioch is an exclusive teaching available only in March. It's a gift from Michael Rood to you for your love gift donation of just $50. Or with a love gift donation of $100 or more, we'll send you The Road to Antioch, plus a 5-foot plush blanket covered with the name of Yehovah and his attributes.
Jews, Gentiles, Israelites, bloodline, proselytes, whoever will may come.
Make your love gift donation now. Call 800-788-7887. That's 800-788-7887. Michael Rood will send you the Road to Antioch collection, including the plush blanket with the name of Yehovah. Call now or visit our website at monthlylovegift.com.
Hurry, offer ends March 31st.
Traditions that we inherited from Babylon through Constantine have us occasionally with a little plastic cup and a little round wafer in a church service having what is called communion. But Yeshua was not having communion with his disciples. It was the last meal before his crucifixion, which happened at the time the Passover lambs were being sacrificed the following morning. Yeshua took this opportunity to explain something that had been embedded in the Israelite culture for then over 1,000 years. Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine to Abraham, and he blessed the Most High, saying, Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, ha'motzi lechem min ha'aretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Yeshua said, this represents my body, which will be broken for you. As often as you do it in remembrance of me. And so we break this bread and we do it in remembrance of him. Likewise, Yeshua took the cup and he blessed the Most High with that blessing that Melchizedek blessed the Most High. Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei pari hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, the King of the universe, the creator of the fruit of the vine. Yeshua said, this represents my shed blood, which will be poured out for the remission of sin. I will not drink another drop of the fruit of the vine. You take my cup and divide it among yourselves, because I won't drink it until I drink it again with you in my Father's kingdom. The marriage supper of the Lamb, Yeshua will lift this cup and he will say, L'chaim, to life everlasting. And until then, we remember what he's done and remember that marriage supper of the Lamb. Get ready. Last night, in hundreds of theaters across America, Tim Mahoney's new film, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy, debuted to multiplied thousands of people who had a rude awakening. Again, on the 15th and the 19th of March, you, your friends and family will have an opportunity to join this movie debut. We have with us tonight Tim Mahoney, the filmmaker who spent more than 15 years researching the truth of Israel's exodus from Egypt and the denial of modern theological academia that has permeated Western Gentile Christianity and atheistic humanism alike. It is my pleasure to welcome to our special edition of Shabbat Night Live, Tim Mahoney. Tim, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Michael.
It was now 15 years plus that the first time that I met you, I had just flown in from Cairo to the Christian Booksellers Convention. And when I met you, you were the president of the American Christian Filmmakers Association.
Yes, I was, actually it was the International Association, and I had been involved with that group for a number of years. Being a filmmaker isn't an easy job, and you've got to get together and share, ideas with each other and pray for each other. And so, I had just been at that conference, and that was right next to the Christian Booksellers Conference, right at the same time.
And we met there in the lobby, and when I met you, I immediately said, Tim, I just got back from Cairo. You've got to get involved in this. They found hundreds of chariots on the bottom of the Red Sea, chariot parts and human and horse remains down there. And I said, you've got to get involved with this. And I didn't know that at the time you had already been involved in this.
Yes, another filmmaker had made a film called The Exodus Revealed and Search for the Red Sea Crossing, and I was involved with trying to help to distribute that. I never actually did distribute it, but it got me involved with the whole Red Sea crossing, and I was taken by it, and that began, which was now it's going on its 17th year in my life. Of 17th or 18th actually. I started in 2001, pursuing, are the stories in the Bible historical?
Yeah, well, that that chance meeting, I will say that in quotes, that chance meeting in which I had been promoting that film for some time. We were carrying it in our bookstore, and I felt this is a story that really needs to be told in its total. That was just a little bit of that, and I told you that I do television, but this really needs a filmmaker to do it. And so that started you really on this quest of really latching into this to give the background, the historical background of this very momentous event in human history.
Yes, so what happened was that I ended up, from that film, there's Dr. Leonard Moeller, and I saw him in that movie, and I contacted him in Sweden, and he ended up coming to the States, and we met. And we ended up taking a trip. We had another person by the name of Aaron Sen who came along, and I brought a few film cameramen and sound, and we went. We were in Egypt, and this was right after 9/11, by the way. So it was an unusual time. It wasn't very crowded with tourism.
Right.
And everyone was sort of on a heightened alert. And so we made our way through a number of locations to look at the sites. And we made our way across the Sinai and down through the Wadi Watir and to Nuweiba Beach. And anyway, so we pursued that whole line of investigation. But I had no clue. I thought I was just going to be involved with a one-year project. And it turned into a life project, to be honest with you.
Now, you, in the course of this, you also met Jim and Penny Caldwell. This is, now, for those who don't know, the first gentleman that you're involved with, in the Red Sea crossing site, he was the one that first took down the robotic dive cameras down to drive them among the coral-encrusted remains of Pharaoh's chariot and army. And the magnetometers, all the electronic equipment that was available to him as a marine biologist.
Yes. Well, he was Leonard is a scientist, but he was able to actually look at it from a scientific, standpoint. I think that's the thing that he brought was, for the first time, I think you had a scientist who is looking at these things and taking it seriously, and that was the beginning. That's when I looked at it and I thought, well, that appealed to me. And then we started to see that there's a whole story here. There's Ron Wyatt who identified this location. There were others who were on both sides of the sea crossing there, and there was just a whole host. If you're a storyteller, there's a huge story to be told just in the investigation of where are these sites.
I didn't know that you went down there with Aaron Sen and Leonard Moeller, because Ron Wyatt was the one who took Aaron Sen down there, and Ron told me that he showed Aaron where the chariot, the gold-plated chariot wheel was, and it was marked by an underwater buoy down there. And this was at a time Ron was telling me that he was going to take me down there, that he showed Aaron Sen where it was, but Ron was failing in health at that time and passed away from cancer within a year of that particular thing. So Aaron Sen, in on this exploration of the Red Sea crossing site, that was, you were getting right back to the foundations of where this was first being exposed by Ron Wyatt and his kind of inexpensive, cheap underwater cameras with the 8mm and all.
Yeah, so we ended up paying for I started the film, and I really wasn't sure what to call it or what it was going to be in the very beginning. Let's just say it was working title Exodus Red Sea something. And eventually, when you started to realize that the story was a story about the Israelites leaving Egypt, then eventually I think we call it Up Out of Egypt. And I was trying to figure out what to call this, but it was going to be, was there evidence for the stories in the Bible, with a big focus on the Red Sea crossing at Nuweiba. And then, as you said, I get a phone call from you. I think you were in Jerusalem when you called me and said, say, there's this couple that you need to meet. And let me see if they'd be interested in meeting. And that's when you connected us with Jim and Penny Caldwell.
That's right, and I had met them. I was on tour, a speaking tour across America, and they identified themselves to me at the end of a lecture night as the people that supplied Ron Wyatt with the video and the photographs of Mount Sinai. These were the people whose Ron said, I can't tell you who they are, I can't tell you where I got this video, because the people's lives are in danger. And so they identified themselves as the people. They had just gotten back to the U.S., and then I knew I had to get you connected with them, because this is integral to the story.
Yeah, and what happened was that we ended up flying down to meet with them, and had this little gathering. Now, I think I've got this right, but Leonard Moeller and Jim Caldwell are actually the same age.
That's right, they're born on the same day.
They're born on the same day. When we've talked with them on the phone call, you realize that here are two men on opposite sides of the world almost, and they're born at the same time, same day. It was really interesting that and they had the same passion to search for this.
And to see what happens is that Jim comes to Mount Sinai from the other end of Saudi Arabia. Leonard Moeller comes across the Red Sea, and Jim ascends Mount Sinai on his and Leonard Moeller's birthday.
Yeah. So what's as I look back on this, after all these years, and you realize that we didn't know what was going to happen. We just knew that there's a story there. And Jim and Penny, so I started filming them. And I started filming lots of different people, getting their testimonies. And, technology keeps changing. So when I filmed, back in the day, it was what we would call standard def, just that, old television look.
Yeah.
And then it became widescreen, and then high def, and now 4K. And so what's happened over the time is that the technology has advanced, yet I have this huge library of investigative material, the Caldwell's information, interviews. I probably have several hundred interviews from many different people, scholars as well as I call them Exodus explorers. And so we were trying to figure out how do you get your arms around such a big story. Because it is a huge story. And I made two films in the beginning that I could tell they just weren't right, and I think you saw one of them. Yeah,
you called me up, asked me to come and debut it. I saw it, and I said, you got to get this out, this is great. But you had a different level that you were going for, and now we see it.
Yeah, I at the time, I just felt that it wasn't good enough. It wasn't right. I couldn't explain it. But I do know that, and I think this is important for people to understand. I've gotten criticized at times from emails. Well, why don't you have all this information? Why aren't you getting it out? Because I'll just have to say that I knew that I wasn't supposed to, because it wasn't right. I had to mature in the storytelling process, and I had to come up with the right approach to tell the story. And had I been premature in it, I don't think we'd be sitting here today. The film that we made, by taking an approach called Patterns of Evidence, if we think about the fact that today the world has moved towards that science and technology are going to save us, right? That people pretty much believe that we're going to be like Star Trek and we're going to go off and explore the galaxy, and that mankind's just going to continue to evolve. And so there's one narrative there. And then there's another narrative, which is the biblical narrative. And people are casting that biblical narrative away, and they're not seeing any of that. And I started to pray about, well, what in the world am I doing? And because, if we think about biblical characters, oftentimes they had to wait a long time. I mean, if you think about Noah, he's building something, and I once actually wrote a song about it. The neighbors just couldn't understand what Noah was doing. He's building this ark, and he's building for something that they have no experience for. And I felt the same way in a sense. I was building something and gathering, and I look back on it now, and I realize that you have to have a story in order to tell a story.
And the story was just, it was evolving.
Yes.
Really. You ended up over in Egypt, and you were taking people down into Egypt to film this and to get interviews.
So we started to gather more and more information to have a broader understanding of what this is. What the biblical story is. So patterns of evidence type film, the approach that I've taken is, what does the Bible say? What is the pattern of evidence that we should be looking for? And then in some ways, well, what does that mean today and into the future? And I wanted to share this. I started to realize that I was making films, if I was to share it with your audience specifically, is that as I thought and prayed about it, I'm making films that are of remembrance and forewarning. And I couldn't get ahead of God in making this type of film. So the first film took 12 years to make it. But what it did is I realized that if you're going to make a film like this, you have to basically tell more than one side of the story. And so my calling has been to have a dialogue with the world.
Now, this dialogue with the world, this wasn't where it was starting out.
No, not at all.
And so you were really forced into this. This is a crisis in your life and in your filmmaking that really steered you in a path that ended up being patterns of evidence.
You're correct. If we go back to that first trip to Egypt in 2002, I went to the very location where the Israelites lived. I thought, let's start there. And
the land of Goshen.
Right, not many people get to that location.
Right.
And there was an archaeologist there who had been digging there for a number of years, world-renowned archaeologist Manfred Bitek. And he had dug at this place, it's called Avaris, but it's Tel al-Daba today, what it's called. And it's right next to the place of Ramesses. And the Bible says that the Israelites were building the store cities of Ramesses and Pithom. Mm-hmm. Well, so here we are at a location right next to it almost. I think they're just like sister cities. I got to the dig site, and I came up to him with a film crew, and he wasn't expecting any of this. I've been trying to reach him for about 2 or 3 months to tell him I was coming. But I was sending the emails to Austria, and he was in Egypt. Because he's an Austrian Egyptologist, and he never got him. So when I show up, he is not happy. Also, the film crew arrives. He's digging, and he says, "You can't. You shouldn't be here. You can't just come on my dig site." And what ended up happening was I sent everyone back, and I said, "Manfred Bitek," I said, "I've traveled a long ways to meet you," and I said, "Could I please just ask you a few questions? And then I'll go." And he said, "Yes." And so I said to him, "Have you found any evidence of the Israelites?" And he said, "So far, not."
This is after years of digging, right there where it should be.
And when he said that, honestly, it was like someone took a 2x4 and swung it and hit me in the side of the head, because I had taken all this effort to get to this location, and finally asked the man who would know, and he said, "So far not." And I remember I almost fumbled with what to say next. And so when I came home, I went through England and filmed in England. I went to the British Museum and filmed there, and then I went home, and I remember sitting in my edit suite on a Saturday morning, looking at this footage, and tears started coming down my face. Because I said, "God, you have to help me. I've gone to the very location where the Israelites are supposed to be, and this man is saying there's no evidence for them." And all of a sudden, I felt like the temperature in the room got cold, and a chill came over my body, and this thought came into my mind: everything that you believe, that your family believes, is a lie. And a terror just gripped me. And all of a sudden another thought came into my mind: stop editing, get up, go to your office. And I got up, I went to my office, go to your bookcase. I went there, read that book. That's how clear it was. pulled this book out, and it was a book on Egyptology. A friend of mine had given it to me. It was by David Rohl, and it was Pharaohs and Kings. And he gave it to me a year earlier, and he said, I think you need to read this book. And I said, thank you. I looked at it, looked at the pictures, and walked over and put it on my bookcase with all the other books. And I had no clue what was in that book. I opened the book up, I started flipping through, looking through it, and there, the very dig site that I was looking at in the other room was mentioned, and the whole story of Joseph and his family was right there.
So your crisis of faith that happened at that moment, that is what is going to eventually steer you into the pattern of evidence that you have presented in your first film, and it continues to this day. Every episode, I interrupt our program so that I can invite you to help us. I'm not interrupting this program with little yellow dots that go across the bottom of your YouTube channel that's constantly popping up advertisement after advertisement to fund this. No, we have stayed completely free from that. We have not taken advantage, even though at the request of YouTube, they want to monetize this, but I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because I am appealing to you. You are our only sponsors. And if you don't support this ministry, it's not going to be supported. We are getting this message out to the world. These are your 2 minutes. That's the only interruption you're going to get, and that's all the time you're going to get. If you don't do something in these 2 minutes, your opportunity is passed. So stand with us. Thank you. Tim, I really brought you in to discuss the new movie, but the new movie is really a continuation. Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus. You never know where a crisis of faith will lead you. And this is the course you're still on. Continue your crisis of faith.
Michael, when that moment happened, when I sat in that edit suite and I was challenged with this dark thought, and fortunately for me, this other voice came into my mind, and I have to believe that it was the Lord, that spoke to go and go look for that book. And I have interviewed a number of people who have had those big questions come into their thoughts, and they never found an answer for them. And so this question of this crisis of faith, how we were raised, what our families believed, they walked away from that, those men. Yeah.
Now, in your new film, I did get to preview it, and I saw that a number of people that you interviewed, theologians, they were preachers, they were pastors, they were at one time believers, but as they got into academia, as they got into the theological realm, then they started to question these things and doubt them, and they came to the same point you did, that everything that you have been taught about the Bible is a lie. And they never recovered from that. They never found the answers. I think they never asked, they never knocked, they never sought at the right doors. But this revelation that you had, really a revelation to lead you into your own library to a book.
Yes, and that then I realized that I had to go to England and interview David Rohl. Now, David Rohl was raised Catholic, but he's an agnostic. He's a declared agnostic now, because he's got questions. So, questions, lots of us have questions. There's not a problem. The challenge is just finding answers, not just letting them sit there, right?
Right. Yeah, to say I don't know, agnostic without knowledge, that's honest. And so the goal would be for someone in that place to with every thought, every ounce of their being, is to find the answer. To search it, if it takes an entire lifetime, it's to search it out.
Yeah.
Most people aren't that honest.
And I have an understanding that you had questions which led you to where you are today. But you could have not pursued the answers to those questions and just drifted off somewhere in life.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and so I think that when it talks about to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, I think that's important, that we're not afraid to have those questions dealt with. Because if you can answer those questions, like I've answered the questions in my own life, do you realize how much bolder and stronger my own understanding is? I actually have some answers.
Right.
And
that puts us both out in the world aggressively to wake people up. Yes, there are answers. We receive some of these answers. We're just going to give you as much as you can absorb.
Yeah, right. And so one of the things that I had to be willing to do in when I was making this first film, Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus, and once again, it took 12 years to make, but I had to be willing to risk the truth of the Bible. Here was and I was making it not just for, let's say, people of faith, but I was making it for everyone. But the deal is this: I'm going to risk that it isn't true if you're willing to risk that it is.
Beautiful.
You see, and guess what happens? I've had people come to showings who have never believed any of it, and within 2 hours come out saying, "It's true! It's true! Do you know that it's true?"
Yeah.
Do you realize that earlier in their life, they've never been able to find answers, but within 2 hours, they moved from being a skeptic, non-believer, to a person who's saying, "It's true, it's true."
And you took them on the same journey you went on. You went and confront them with the scoffers, with the people that don't believe. You let them have their say. The agnostics, the atheists, the theologians who are denying the veracity of the scriptures. You let them have their full say in this, and you laid out there first. Here it is. This is what I had to confront.
Yeah. The word that came to my mind was be generous. Tim, be generous. Be generous. Let me understand what you're saying. So when I go meet with a scholar who doesn't believe any of this, I have to understand that they got there somehow. And so tell me why. Explain to me why you don't believe that Moses wrote the first books of the Bible. Explain to me why you don't think that there's an Exodus. Help me to understand where you're coming from. And as you know, I didn't know anything about this, but and I realized that I don't have the answers, but I have to search for them by asking the right questions. And I think that it's okay to ask questions if they're advancing you in the discovery of an answer, right? And so as I started asking those scholars, explain to me why you don't believe. Explain to me. And just be generous. In some ways, just have a loving, compassionate heart, and be in relationship, be in friendship, and that's the approach that you'll see in the films. Is that
there's no animosity. I mean, you're just laying it out, saying, tell me your story.
I just want to know what the truth is, because you see, our children and our grandchildren are wrestling with the same things. A lot of times, they're afraid to publicly acknowledge that they have questions, or that they're questioning their family's faith heritage, right? But they got questions. So what happens is that there are a lot of people who say they're a believer, but they actually are somewhat of an agnostic because they have so many questions, and that's the reason why they're somewhat passive, or they're not really on fire with what they believe, because they haven't resolved a lot of the questions that they have. And so for me, I didn't know I'd be drawn into this, now I can very much be sympathetic to people who've had crises of faith. It could be a crisis of faith because you lost a child, or you had a health problem, or you have financial distress, or you have some theological question that says there's no evidence. But in all of those areas, you're not the first person to have been there, and you just have to work through that. And for me, those 12 years of working through it then became Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus.
I think Darwin had a similar crisis of faith, And what he ended up with is the origin of the species, completely waylaid, and his path took people away from God, away from reality, away from verifiable science. But you're using science in bringing people into the story through this crisis of faith and letting people see all the evidence, not just selective evidence that Darwinian evolution is based on. But let's go back and get into the story of not only the scriptures, but scientifically.
Well, what ends up happening is that I recognize that there can be a piece of evidence, let's say, presented. And what a pattern of evidence, what happens oftentimes is people will find one piece of evidence and they'll build everything around it. So the idea of a pattern, it becomes more, it becomes stronger because you have to have a sequence of events. So if you can find a sequence in a pattern, then you've got more points of reference, right? And that builds upon itself. And so what we decided with the first part of the investigation was, well, what would be the pattern you'd look for the Exodus? Let's just say, can you see that pattern in history? And can you find a place where there's arrival of the Israelites of a Semitic group into Egypt? Is there some type of character like a Joseph that might show up? Is there any presence there, you know? And guess what? That's exactly what you see. Now, what's very interesting about that investigation is that film then led to the new film that was going to be made, that we made now, called Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy. But that very arrival of the Israelites in Egypt and this connection between Moses is the ability to write. And the new film, Patterns of Evidence, The Moses Controversy, asks the question, could Moses have written the first books of the Bible?
Now, I have to say here that when you first presented this to me, I was aware of the writing of the alphabet, of the different things that were discovered over in Saudi Arabia, the petroglyphs and some of the writing there. But I really was not tracking. You really bring to light things that I have not seen before, and this has been my life. But you have brought things out that I had not come to grips with, and evidence is there. And what really hit me on this, Tim, is that the evidence that we see concerning the ability of the Israelites, the ability of Moses to be able to write the Torah, I didn't realize that this is in so much of a controversy until you brought these things out.
Yes, it's true. Today, almost all of the mainstream scholars will dispute the fact that Moses wrote the first books of the Bible. There's something called the documentary hypothesis, which is saying that the different names of God are used. And so they've got different authors. They think, well, this one used Elohim and the other one used Jehovah, and so they've got these different names of God. And this happened in Germany. This is where this idea was brought up last century. And so that then started to, for many people to say, well, then we don't think Moses could have written an eyewitness account. And so if we go back to investigating the stories of the Bible, if you're going to look for locations such as the Red Sea crossing, or you're going to look for Mount Sinai, you're going to look for geographical, indicators. What does it say? How far did they travel? Which campsite did they go? What was at that campsite? Was there a well there? Was the water bitter, right? Is there a place where water came out of a rock? What would that have looked like? What does Mount Sinai, what are the attributes of Mount Sinai? It's all giving you information. And so I realized that if we're going to explore the story of the Exodus and the story of God's deliverance, and we're going to explore Mount Sinai, you have to know that it wasn't written by somebody making the story up 1,000 years later.
And that's basically what came out of Germany, the JEPD documents, that theory. And what happened is that continued to sweep through academia as if it is reality. And what I found in my research on this, these people are really ignorant of the biblical text, and they have not gone to the Bible and understood it from that perspective. They have taken it from the outside, a humanistic, an atheistic viewpoint, and they have tried to describe the Bible in humanistic terms. Just like evolution is the attempt to understand the universe in humanistic terms, with there being no God. It's all the same thing. This is modern academia, and a lot of people do not understand that the criticism of the Bible is based on this humanistic viewpoint, and so they're unaware of the arguments that they have been presenting and that have been accepted. You have invited them in to tell their story.
Yes, that's right. And so, because if you don't allow the different viewpoints in, if you're sharing something with your family about the Bible, they're going to say, oh, that's just one-sided. But if you're able to invite in these other viewpoints, and you're able to test them. It's like a product test, right? Here's product A, B, and C. Here's viewpoint A, here's viewpoint B, here's viewpoint C. As you can test those ideas, you go, wait a minute, there's some gaps in this criticism about the Bible. And oftentimes it's about interpretation. How are they interpreting what they have? And so that's what Patterns of Evidence is about. It's really about investigating the biblical stories from the ground up, and being able to really hear what the criticism is and deal with it. Because your children and your grandchildren are going to hear this, and so many of them today go off to university and they start hearing about the Bible that it's just a book of fairy tales, and they come home and they say, hey, I'm an agnostic, or I'm an atheist, I don't believe in this, And that's why the Patterns of Evidence approach is the scientific approach. So let's use science. Let's use the tool. Let's use the methodology that many people esteem, and reinvestigate the stories of the Bible. And what you end up finding is that people who are very confident in their doubt now are not so confident.
The debut was last night. The people that have seen that, they are getting to watch this program and watch you, your sincerity, you telling the story as it developed. But we don't want to give away, for those who have not yet seen the debut, which is going to be happening tomorrow and just a couple days from now, all across America. But we do want to tell them a little bit about what this new one, this Moses controversy, is about. Can you, without telling us too much, we don't want to spill the whole story, but tell us a little bit about what we're about to witness.
Well, it's really about how would God communicate His word to His people. And so this film investigates what writing system would Moses have used. And depending upon where you put the Israelites in history, whether you follow a biblical dating system or a secular approach towards dating, I'm going to say that some people have thrown away the biblical dates, and they said, no, we think it happened at this time, at the time of Ramesses. And so what you're going to see in this film is this investigation starts to dig deeper into what would Moses have used to write. And what we end up finding is that there's an early form of writing. And the mainstream scholars will not call it Hebrew. But what we show is that it's absolutely connected, potentially all the way back to the time of Joseph. And that's why I brought that up.
And you're showing evidences there in the desert of Egypt, on the Sinai Peninsula, of this writing that is there. You're showing that hieroglyphs and this writing, this alphabetic writing, not pictures, but alphabetic writing, is resident there at about the time of Joseph.
Right.
This is something that was new to me. I had not seen this before, and this was absolutely compelling.
If God is going to give his word to people, and we think about the writing of the first books, there needed to be some type of a system that could be passed on to the Israelites, because there was a command that says, teach these to your children, teach these commands to your children, write them on your doorposts. So you say, okay, well, what would Moses have used? Some people say, well, he might have used Egyptian. Well, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and that took years to learn. There was almost 1,000 characters, a very complex system. But all of a sudden comes like a breakthrough. And it's a small amount of letters that are phonetic, and that you're able to use these to form words. And if you think about, if God's going to give his word, and you're going to keep it and maintain it, it's not going to be like telephone game and it changes. This is what people criticize, is say, well, the stories of the Bible are just legends that grew over time. Yes, maybe some people left Egypt, but the parting of the sea was just part of the fire sitting around the campfire exaggerating this story. And Pharaoh's, it's just a fairy tale. It's a legend. It's a folklore. Or is it an eyewitness testimony of Moses writing down what God told him? Because it says that the Lord told Moses to write these in a book.
Yeah. It was 20 years ago. I was living in Israel, and Joe Zayas, who was the director of the Department of Antiquities, he was presented with the evidence of Mount Sinai in Arabia, where the Bible says that Mount Sinai was. He refused to look at the evidence, and he said, no one will ever find Mount Sinai. It is a literary invention. And that was an official statement from the Department of Antiquities, also known as the Rockefeller Museum. Mm-hmm. And so he's basically saying the Bible is a fairy tale, it's just made up. No one will ever find Mount Sinai, and that's it. Refused to look at the evidence. Wouldn't look at any evidence, no patterns of evidence, none of the artifacts that were brought back by Jim and Penny Caldwell, the people that had been there. And as you say, there were numerous explorers of this place, but that people have their mind set. They don't want to look at the evidence because they don't want their fairy tale world to be shaken up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if it were true, I showed this film to a producer in New York and her husband, they saw it. And afterwards, there was a huge argument. I mean, they were going at it because one of them was saying it's true and the other one was saying, no, if this is true, do you know what that means? Do you know what that means for us? Do you see? That's the problem. This is the reason, this is the challenge, is that I don't want it to be true. So if people have already interpreted that there's no truth to this, and I don't want it to be true, then they're going to see evidence in a completely different light. They're not even going to recognize it. And so what we're seeing as I'm working with this patterns approach is that people keep dismissing, yeah, that's where the fairy tale came from. They've never organized it. But with the great thing is that with documentary film, I can gather the testimonies of different people, pro or con, and you can see it. And then I can allow you and your family and your children and your uncles and aunts and all the skeptical family members to see it for themselves. And then it's up to them.
Well, it's been more than 15 years for both of us on this journey, and I want people to be able to step into this storyline as it develops, because this is not your last movie right here, right now, with the Moses controversy.
Right, we have a whole series of patterns of evidence. So Moses controversy, you've got to see it because it lays the foundation for what was written and why it was written. But then we're moving, right now I'm working on the Red Sea, patterns of evidence, the Red Sea miracle.
Well, I want to have you back. Next week, we're going to go into this in more detail and hopefully pick up on some of the things that you're going to be doing in the future on this. But ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you get out there, that you see this movie that has been released. It'll be out on DVD soon, and make sure that your friends, your family, everyone gets to see this, because the evidence is there. The Almighty moved in the course of human events us. He has reached down from heaven. He has given us his commandments. And as Solomon said, the whole duty of man is to love God and to keep his commandments. And those commandments are true, they are real, and Tim is going to take us another step in the journey. Thank you for being with us. I would like to close in prayer. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmerecha. Ya'ir Yehovah panav elecha v'chunecha. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yisen lecha shalom. Hashem Yeshua HaMashiach Zar Shalom. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Yeshua, our Messiah, our Savior and King. Amen. Well, Shabbat Shalom to our fans. Shavua Tov. Have a good week. We'll see you back here next week. Shabbat Night Live.